Hey everyone, welcome to week 43. This is day 5. This is our last day of our gouache and chroma week. So the suffering, and today we've painted Manu, we've painted Sepa, we've painted Danny. We did a painting of Fer, doing that thing that I kind of like, which is actually painting and then drawing. Usually we draw and then paint. This is kind of upside down, but I actually like it a lot. And for today, I'm painting the hands of one of the artists that I admire the most, GOAT ever. So we'll see how that goes. By the way, next week, new theme, we'll be here. Okay, let's get started. This is day 5. This is our last day, thank God, in this gouache and chroma week, where we've been using Danny's spare set of Himi paints, these jelly paints that I've been having. Honestly, I've been having a blast working with for the past couple of days. They may not be my cup of tea. It doesn't mean that I can't enjoy them. It doesn't mean that I can't appreciate what they have to offer. And obviously, having done already 4 paintings with these paints, I'm kind of getting used to what I can and what I can't do with them. My initial intention before starting this week was to say, I want to embrace saturation. I want to acknowledge that my starting point is going to be a very saturated pigment, and instead of just trying to neutralize it in some way or another, I want to use that high chroma. Like I expressed a couple of days ago, that chroma may be super scary at the beginning, but because it is gouache, it tends to transform as it dries, as it oxidizes. So when it comes in contact with oxygen, what it does is actually change a little bit in value and change a little bit in saturation. So you're not going to get, these super bright paints that you're working with, but what you get in the final painting is a version of those colors. When they come in contact with oxygen, they behave in different ways than oils do. And I think that makes it bearable for me. I think the fact that I know that they are going to tone down a little bit just makes me less scared of them. So that has been really enjoyable. Yesterday, I had to sort of invoke some of my painting heroes in order to try and solve the painting. I've always understood paintings as problems, as exercises in problem solving. So anything that we can do to try and solve that problem effectively and honestly, because effectively could just mean that you just take the fastest way out and you're employing, a ton of different techniques and aids just to get the hell out of there very quickly. But many times those devices that you could use to solve those problems in the quickest way possible may not really be close to your sensibility. When you reflect upon who you are with honesty, you may tell yourself, no, I actually don't feel any sort of connection with the dynamics that I'm using to try and solve this problem. So I'm better off just saying no to them. I'm better off just kind of staying away from those things, because ultimately what we want is just an honest response. So the way that I've kind of understood that I can go about doing that is by saying, I'm going to call upon artists that I really, really love. And hopefully by learning from their experience, by learning from their past works, I can just charge myself up and be so full of energy that now I feel that I can tackle any problem, and that I'm going to find a way out that is going to be, yes, based upon their teachings, but hopefully and ultimately based upon my own experiences. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do the heavy lifting. I'm going to be in charge of finding my way. And in the end, I think that that's the most important part, that we find our way. There's tons of ways to try and solve a problem effectively. If you guys feel that every single tool out there is at our disposal to try and solve a problem, more power to you. Try to find those devices that can help you figure things out and use them. Again, if you don't feel weird about using any of the available help that's out there, that's perfectly fine. For me, I'm good just having that daily dose of energy that comes from geniuses throughout history and other artists that can help to push me through. And I think that combination of Malshevsky and RVK and Ruprecht yesterday, it certainly proved to be, just what I needed in order to navigate the problems that I was having with Fer's painting, and just to find a solution that was comfortable for me. But I still felt that it could answer to the original intent that I had, and I wasn't really betraying anything that I had set myself to do at the beginning. So I felt kind of cool about that. Now, because I felt so much energy and I felt so pumped up with having my painting heroes in mind, I was like, I'm going to geek out today. And I'm going to speak about one of the artists that I have the utmost respect for, who I think is also the most brilliant visual storyteller that I've ever seen. And it is Mike Mignola. For the people that know me, they know that I am a huge fan of Mignola. This video is probably going to show my fanboyism coming out. Again, this is me just geeking out. Why am I talking about Mignola today? Because I'm certainly not doing anything in a very graphic style where there's a ton of contrast, where there's like light and dark shapes. No, but I am painting his hands. And I know that it can sound like a little cheesy, a little overly sentimental, because like, oh my God, you know, this is one of the artists that I respect the most in the world. Bless his hands. His hands are his tools. I'm going to paint those. And all those things are true. They're corny, but they're true. But also, I have a reason for doing this. See, because I was thinking so much about Polish painting, because I was thinking about Matejko and Malszewski, and then I thought, well, they're not as good and as close to my heart as Olga Woznanska. And when I was looking again at her paintings, her portraits have the most amazing hands I've ever seen painted, period. We've already said that my favorite hands ever are Jerome Witkin's, in these lithographs. And that is true. That remains true. Jerome Witkin is an absolute genius. But there's something about Olga Woznanska's hands. It's even hard for me to explain. There's this vagueness to it, and yet she's able to communicate specificity. I don't know how to do that. I really don't. I think that is just magic. To me, as a painter, when somebody can turn a shape that is so complex and express it with such simplicity and yet convey that complexity, then I just faint. I really don't know how to rationalize that. And when I look at her hands, I'm always reminded also of Mela Muter. And Mela Muter also did just these incredible hands. She was a bit more of an expressionist than Olga Woznanska was. But these two painters, oh my God. I mean, you really can't paint any better than this. So I was thinking of Woznanska, I was thinking of Mela Muter, and I was thinking of hands. And I suddenly came across this screen grab that I did on my phone of Mignola. Somebody else was taking a picture with him. And I saw his hands and I was like, oh, those hands are super cool. Like, I can actually do a cool painting. And when I saw that photo, I was reminded immediately of Mela Muter and Olga Woznanska. And the reason I was reminded was because the modeling of the hands is not really sort of traditional. I mean, there's obviously light and shadow, and there are very recognizable cast shadows. So in terms of understanding the hands as volumes, you can totally see where the hands turn from light to shade. But still, the lighting condition just makes it a little bit different. And the coolest part for me was that the light of the hands seemed to envelop a lot of the details and seem to compress a lot of the information that's inherent to the hands. So a lot of forms just kind of blended with each other. And I was like, oh, wow, this is perfect. I mean, it's a lighting condition that kind of reminds me of Mela Muter, of doing far more expressive hands and just relying upon weird color decisions and maybe some drawing notes to try and convey those powerful hands. And they're open enough that they remind me also of Woznanska. So a lot of the painting today is probably 90% more Mela Muter than Woznanska, because I am actually embracing the saturated colors, the high chroma of the gouache palette. So I'm not going to try to control a lot of that in order to get closer to the more, I would say, naturalistic interpretations that were inherent to Woznanska's work. No, I actually feel quite comfortable with color now. The handling of the paint still gives me trouble, but I wanted to channel in the same way that I channeled von Kaufmann and Malszewski yesterday. I wanted to channel my Mela Muter in these hands and see if I could get away with making like these super, super expressive hands and use these very saturated colors to solve them. There's also something important about Mignola, and I could speak about rhythm in storytelling, which I think he's the best in the world at doing. I could speak about understanding value and contrast as a storytelling device, which again, I think he's the best in the world at doing. But I actually want to speak about something that's kind of funny in his work, and it's something that usually happens with the best of comic book artists and the best of visual storytellers. It's something that's actually very, very cool. And this is something that for somebody like me who was sort of trained in a naturalist manner, I was trained to respect and to try to depict nature faithfully. So I'm going to say that, yes, while there is post-impressionistic American color theory in there, I'm going to say that I was trained basically in a naturalist way. I wasn't close to having a contemporary atelier like classical training, but I was trained to respect nature. So for somebody like me, when I see light and shadow being depicted, I immediately compare it with nature. I immediately compare it to the rules of nature, to the way light behaves in nature. And the coolest thing about Mike's work is that he doesn't obey nature. Like, he can have, in a same setting, 3 different light sources. Like, he could have light coming from so many directions, and it doesn't matter. And if you start dissecting what he's doing with his light and shadow masses, it won't make sense. If you just rationally impose yourself, it makes absolutely no sense. You don't really understand when the light source changed direction. You don't understand why a secondary light source is only affecting a few things. But when you put everything together, when you look at the image as an abstract rhythm of dark and light shapes, it is remarkable. It is incredible. And it reads perfectly. So what I love about this is that Mignola completely understands light and shadow. That's so obvious to see. But he's making choices and he's altering how light and shadow behave, how those shapes present themselves to us in order to be able to tell a story. And most importantly, in order to be able to inject rhythm while he's telling a story. And that is amazing. So the most valuable lesson I can have as somebody who wanted to be a comic book artist but failed miserably at it and realized that I just wasn't good at storytelling, it's about using and bending rules and saying, hey, you can do something in your picture that doesn't make sense if it helps you get closer to your intent. Do whatever you have to do in order to get closer to your intent. Whatever it is. If you have to change the rules of nature, change them. It doesn't matter. If it reads in the end as the image that you wanted to construct, and if it helped you in communicating with efficiency what you wanted to communicate, that is perfect. And this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. You know, some devices that we use are physical devices. And a lot of people say, well, I need to project my images onto my surface in order for me to get my drawing down quicker. Or I need to grid my surface in order to be able to transfer my sketch more faithfully. A lot of devices that we use are technical. But then, you know, what Mike is showing us is that there are devices also that lie outside kind of like the technical aspects of painting and many times go against, you know, the very rules that you had set for yourself when painting. So even though I could be painting light, even though I want to be faithful to the nature of light, I can actually do whatever I want in a painting because it is a painting. It is not nature. A painting can't compete with nature. That's what nature is there for. So the fact that we're doing a painting means that this is a whole other universe and we can actually set the rules for our universe. And it's just so empowering when I realized that we could do that we could act as our own directors of our little world, you know, this little world that we were creating where panels or paintings were just windows into that world that were meant to tell a story. Now, the story that I can tell through one image is very different from the story that, you know, Mike can tell in 32 pages and in dozens of panels. But in the end, they are just devices to tell stories. And understanding that rules were flexible enough to be broken by an artist and to be used so intelligently in the way that Mignola does with all his work just gives me so much power, so much strength that, again, kind of cheesy painting his hands, maybe corny, a little overly sentimental. It doesn't matter. I feel he is that huge for me. I feel he is that big of an artist. And it gave me a chance while I was painting, not only to tackle gouache, not only to tackle high chroma, but also to remind myself that, hey, this is like a sandbox. This is your playground and you can do anything you want. What you have to understand is that the choices that you make can either take you farther from what you wanted to say or it can bring you closer to what you wanted to say. So ideally, you always want to get closer and closer to your intent. But that choice is yours and that liberty is yours and you can use it however you please. And that is amazing. So that's why I'm always going to be grateful to Mignola. And that's why I will admire him, until the end of my days, because I think he is absolutely incredible. That was it for today. That was it for this week. We're going to burn these paints now. Honestly, can't do this anymore. No, it was tough for me, and particularly today. Oh my God. Talk about thinking that you're doing things right and then suddenly try to paint a pair of hands of somebody you respect. And you're like, yeah, no, I don't understand anything. So next week, I'm going to go back to oils. I'm even going to do something because I was working with such high saturation this week. I'm going to go back, and maybe for a couple of weeks, I'm going to go back to using my faithful yellow ochre. Very cheap yellow ochre, like a Winton yellow ochre, so nothing fancy here. But I'm going to go back to my yellow ochre, and I'm going to put aside my bismuth yellow, my very saturated lemon yellow, my yellow green that I've been using for, the past couple of months. I want to go back to that yellow ochre. I want to feel like I can have a conversation with my old friend again. That's going to be kind of cool. And next week, we're going to have obviously a new theme. I think next week is kind of inspired by what happened with Sepa's painting on Tuesday. So I'll leave you guys with that hint, but that's going to be for next week. So I'll see you guys next week. Thank you. Bye.